Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's JPR, and welcome back to another video. If you didn't see my community post the other night, we just hit 80,000 subscribers. So once again, please allow me to say thank you. You guys are the best. And what better way to divide my channel's new guests than with a video like this, where I'll be ranking all 8 of the core Pokemon regions from worst to best, which inevitably means that somebody's favorite region is gonna get crapped on. This really was a tragic decision. Now, when I say I'm ranking the regions, I mean just that, the regions themselves, not the generations as a whole, not the new Pokemon introduced in those regions. This is mostly gonna be ranking them from a geographic standpoint, and maybe to break some ties over here and there, I'll consider the Pokemon variety, and maybe some of the overworld music as well, because background music is about the only thing that I have to judge Kalos Route 1 on. And as always, this is just my silly opinion. I don't expect people to fully agree with this list, I'm just showing off what I value in a Pokemon region. So starting off with number 8, yep, we're off to a controversial start already, it's Galar, sorry. Now Galar does have some good things going for it, like the wild area. That's the end of the list. Yeah, I've touched on this before, but I'm not really a fan of the way Galar's routes are designed. They are mind-numbingly straightforward without any form of puzzles or anything really interesting happening. While HMs being gone is still a positive in my book, I seriously don't think Game Freak knows how to make well-designed explorable areas without them. The only area in the game that I got somewhat lost in is the Glimwood Tangle, and even that was disappointingly short. There are 2 small caves, if you even want to call them that, and that's about as far as Galar's dungeon-like areas go. But beyond just bland routes and lacking dungeons, there is one other offender in Galar's geography, and that would be the cities. It is so frustrating because Galar has some of the most unique and interesting looking city designs in the entire series, but so many of them have little to nothing to do in them. In a lot of cases, you see how big the cities are, but you can't actually go there. Balonlea is a great example of a city that I really wanted to explore more of, but past the first 2 houses and gym, the rest of the city is roped off. You physically can't go any further. I've never been so disappointed in an area before. There's stuff like this all through Galar, like the giant cathedral in Hammerlock that you can't go in, or the mill on Route 3 that you can admire from a distance. In most past Pokemon games, the rule always was if you could see it, you could go there and explore it. Most of the time. In Galar, it barely ever feels that way. I know part of that is just because it's 3D, and of course you have like a longer camera and you can see further, but even then, it's still a problem. Maybe this is just because most of the development time went into designing the wild area, but even that is very rough around the edges. Don't get me wrong, it's still a dream come true to have an open world area in a Pokemon game, but the presentation of the wild area is subpar to say the least. Not to mention it just looks strictly worse than the rest of the game. Almost every route and city looks immensely better graphically speaking than the wild area does. And exploration wise, the wild area just feels incredibly shallow. Now, I'm well aware that the Crown Tundra hasn't come out yet, and they did say that it will focus on exploration and will presumably introduce the many dungeons that mainland Galar is lacking, but I don't know, to me it feels wrong to have all that content segregated from the actual region. I'd rather have those dungeons shared between mainland Galar and the Crown Tundra than packing them all into the DLC. That's just my take though. Galar does have some great Pokemon variety though, with most areas boasting large numbers of new Pokemon to discover, but I feel like that doesn't make up for the overall lackluster design of the region. Moving on. Number 7, moving from the newest Pokemon region to one of the oldest, we have the Johto region. Now, I am a big Johto fanboy. This is a very nostalgic region for me, but I have to admit, it has some faults. First off, it's really bland, like Windows XP screensaver bland. 80% of the region is basically grassland. Secondly, Johto has an awful problem with Pokemon variety. Almost every route in the game recycles the same basic group of Pokemon, and because Johto also has an issue with lack of EXP, all the wild Pokemon stay around level 15 to 25 throughout the entire region. As an example, here's the next to last route in Johto, not counting the Safari Zone expansion and the remakes. There are basically 3 options here, and they're all Gen 1 Pokemon. And here's the route before that, the one that connects to the Lake of Rage. Sure, it may look a lot better, but minus Girafarig, these are all species that you could catch earlier in the game. Nothing here is new. Where are the cool Gen 2 Pokemon like Houndour or Caesar? The answer is they're chilling in Kanto. You can't even obtain them until the post-game. But before I go off on another tangent about Gen 2 and its awful decisions in regard to Pokemon distribution, let's get back to the geography since that's the main talking point. Yes, it's boring, but there are a few gems. The region still presents you with a split path choice around the midway point, and there are a few obscure areas to explore. The biggest issue with Johto overall is that I feel like it wasn't properly fleshed out because it shares a connection with Kanto, which similarly had to be watered down. It's not bad, but a lot of its flaws become apparent when replaying it. At number 6, we have the predecessor to Johto, the Kanto region. Now, I will say, for a first attempt, Kanto isn't too bad. I love how interconnected this region is and how it presents you with multiple choices. Whenever I replay a Kanto game, depending on how I've built my team, I always have to make a conscious decision on which gym leader I fight first, Erika, Koga, or Sabrina. By the way, the answer is never Sabrina, you just don't do that. Kanto also has some memorable and challenging dungeons like Mount Moon, Rock Tunnel, and Cerulean Cave, as well as some that you have to find on your own like the Seafoam Islands or the Power Plant. This region rewards you for going off the beaten path, and I think that's the number one thing that puts it above Johto. Sure, Johto has areas that you can go dig deeper into, like the Ruins of Alph, Union Cave, and Mount Mortar, but the rewards are often disappointing compared to what you get in Kanto. In Kanto, you are literally rewarded with legendary Pokemon for exploration. That's something I wish more modern regions would do. But sadly, like Johto, Kanto suffers from the same big two problems: lack of geographic diversity and lack of Pokemon diversity. Though I'm more willing to forgive Kanto for the latter issue because there were literally only 150 Pokemon at the time, and I suppose Let's Go did improve on that issue if we're counting that. Also, Kanto just has some routes that aren't even worthy of being called routes. How is this in the same category as this? Number 5, the Alola region. Now, Alola is an odd case. It does a lot right and a lot wrong. Like Galar, I also feel like Alola misses the mark when it comes to exploration, though the routes are a bit better designed with more twists and turns. And while I'm not a huge fan of breaking the region up into 4 chunks, apparently if you put the islands together, it's actually one of the biggest, if not the biggest Pokemon region. I don't remember where that discovery came from, it was a long time ago, and honestly, I'm not even sure how they measured that since Alola isn't on a grid of any kind, but I can believe it. It has some pretty expansive areas on all 4 islands. But anyway, I think Alola does have some awesome cities, great overworld music, and actually has pretty good Pokemon distribution, even before the Regional Dex expansion and the Ultra games, which just made it even better. I always thought that out of all the regions that Alola has the strongest lineup of both new and old Pokemon to catch. There are many fan favorites present here. The main downfall of Alola, in my opinion, is that this region is frustratingly linear. And I know, Pokemon has been linear for a pretty long time, but in Alola, I feel like this region, more than any other, had an opportunity to be less linear with how the island challenge worked. For instance, the general rule is that you have to complete all of the trials on one island before you can challenge the island Kahuna. In that case, why do I have to do all of these trials in a specific order? Akala Island is especially guilty of this because it has water, fire, and grass trials. It feels like it should have been way more open. It gets to a point where all these roadblocks like the Sudowoodos in the ranch and the guy on his Stoutland sniffing around and the freaking captain's barrier, seriously, how do these things not interfere with the civilians' everyday life? These are so stupid. I just think this was the perfect region to take the player off the predetermined rails and let you explore, but instead, it guides every step of the way. It's so frustrating, honestly. Number 4, now this one might be a bit of a surprise to you longtime fans, because you should all know that I'm not a big fan of Pokemon X and Y. It's probably the game that I by far have the most criticisms of, but the actual region of Kalos is not one of them. I actually really liked what they did here. Yeah, it's still linear and it's paced kind of funkily, but I think the actual dungeons and routes and cities are all pulled off pretty well. Part of it may have just been Game Freak's decision to divide Kalos into 3 sub-regions, being Central Kalos, Coastal Kalos, and Mountain Kalos. I think this gives each part of the region its own distinct flavor, none of the routes feel too repetitive, and the Pokemon, oh lordy, the Pokemon! Mwah! 450 Pokemon! This region is 7 years old, and it still has the largest regional dex yet. Now, I don't think that lineup is as solid as the 400 we got in Alola. There notably aren't a lot of brand new Pokemon, but still, you gotta give them credit. 450 Pokemon gives you a ton of options to choose from if you like to replay these games a lot. Granted, the bad part of replaying Kalos is that you have to deal with the rest of X and Y shenanigans, but at the very least, the region is pretty good. Number 3 goes to the Sinnoh region. I think exploration-wise, Sinnoh is one of the best. It offers a lot of opportunities to go off the beaten path and discover new things. A lot of routes are straight up optional, but you might just get something good if you take the time to explore. The only black eye on the experience, in my opinion, is the HM selection. It's no secret the entire B-Barrel race has been insanely enslaved due to how many HMs Sinnoh has. It's pretty ridiculous. And to make matters worse, it's just hard to go anywhere in Sinnoh without passing through Mount Coronet, which almost always requires rock smash and strength to get through, sometimes even rock climb. As a result, Sinnoh is a region that I hardly ever find myself revisiting on foot a lot. I generally just fly from point A to point B because it's way less of a hassle. There are also some locations like the marshlands and Route 217 that I feel are just a bit too careless with your spare time. Please, I'm 10 years old, I have homework due tomorrow. Other than that, I can't complain much. Sinnoh offers some of the most expansive routes in the series with a generous amount of side material and even some post-game locations to go through. I know the Diamond and Pearl Pokédex is a big talking point amongst fans, but hey, Platinum fixed it up pretty well. Now, 210 Pokemon in the regional dex still isn't a mighty impressive number, even back then, and it does feel like a random number to stop on, but I think the line of Pokemon in Platinum is pretty solid nonetheless. You shouldn't have any trouble putting together a solid team in this region. The number 2 spot is going to go to Unova. Unova is another pretty linear region, even in the sequels, but it has a great variety in its many locations, which is made even better through the addition of seasons. With the 4 seasons, you can revisit multiple locations at different times of the year, and many of them change drastically, especially in autumn and winter. I think this was an awesome way to add some depth to Unova and give you reasons to revisit prior locations. And just like in Kanto, Unova rewards your curiosity with encounters with legendary Pokemon, and this is one aspect of the region that I feel not enough people talk about. Also, this region has the perfect amount of HMs in my opinion. You basically only need Strength and Surf for a majority of the game, and Cut for the beginning, which you can just teach to a burner Pokemon. This allows new parts of the region to open up as you progress, but keeping up with your HMs doesn't feel like a tedious chore like it does in some other regions. I like how Unova has a lot of backtracking built into it with both the HMs and the seasons. It's a balance that I feel like not a lot of the other regions have hit on as strongly. At a glance, Unova is a pretty straightforward region, but there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. If you do enough digging, you'll find a lot of stuff to do here. Like Lola, I think this region is top-notch in the music category as well, and I really like the Pokemon selection in both games. Sure, in the original Black and White you only have 150 Pokemon like in Kanto, but they're all brand new and spaced out fairly well. And in the sequels you get a total of 300 Pokemon, both old and new, which is still a pretty decent amount all these years later. And of course that leaves none other than the Hoenn region as our number 1. Like Sinnoh, Hoenn has some absolutely spectacular routes. Route 113 covered in volcanic ash and the rainforest of Route 119 notably being 2 of my favorite locations of all time. Hoenn also has a variety of ways to reward you for exploration. There are some rare berry trees to find, good secret base locations, and even sometimes legendary Pokemon in the form of the Reggie Trio. That part is probably my favorite. Hoenn is chock full of mysterious findings like the Tomb of the Reggies, the Sealed Chamber, the Desert Tower, Scorched Slab, Seafloor Cavern, you name it. Almost every location I visit in Hoenn leaves me wanting more. I know a common criticism of Hoenn is the too much water meme, but honestly I don't mind. That's the entire theme of Hoenn, is land and sea. It makes sense for it to be split 50-50. And plus, it's not like it's just exclusively water. You have little side areas like the abandoned ship, underwater areas to explore, and even a little town that's completely optional to find. I think more than any other region, Hoenn just creates amazing memories because you chose to explore. I'm a little disappointed that ORAS removed or reduced a few of these locations, but I still think it has that same Hoenn charm. Now, it's not flawless by any means, there are still far too many HMs, although I don't find them to be as obtrusive as they are in Sinnoh, and the regional dex, it's okay at best. There are a few too many not good Pokemon in my opinion. But by and large, this is my favorite slice of the Pokemon world to continually revisit. I think they nailed this region. And that's gonna do it for today's video. Hopefully you all still like me a little bit. Come on, it wasn't that bad. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you want to see more content like this, then be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.